Hello. And today I have the absolute honor and pleasure of interviewing one of my friends. I would say I've become very good friends with Phyllis and someone that I respect and look up to as a professional and just as a woman choosing a life that she is creating. And the reason for today's interview, well, one of the many reasons is she has a new book out. And that book, I'm going to give you the whole title because it's really awesome and it's near and dear to my heart. It's Empowered You, Free Yourself from Generational Conditioning to Unleash Confidence, Happiness, and Resilience. And Phyllis, welcome.
Thank you, Vicki. I am so excited, and this is what the book looks like.
It's beautiful and it is a really good book. I had the opportunity to read it and geez, it never fails to surprise me how much more there is to dig into. And it doesn't always have to be so, well, to your point, what we were talking about earlier, doesn't always have to be the negative stuff. So I want to hear all about the birth of this book, but can you tell the audience about who you are and what your focus is?
So I am Phyllis Ginsburg, author of 3 books now. And I started this journey really not knowing if I would like being an author, if there was something that I had to share that people would want. But it was like being nudged. I was being guided. And I'll tell you, in the beginning, I went kicking and screaming. I'm like, I've never been public. I had been a therapist. Like my world was not about me at all. It was about my clients, my family, my kids, my husband, the dog, and the cat. I didn't have like an outer identity and personality. My close friends knew me, but for the most part, I was very private. And so this was a huge embarkment, and that was like a decade ago. So once I decided, okay, it's time for a 3rd book, and I knew I was going to write something, I had all this content, and it was way too much to put in one book. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to divide this into, I got a piece of notebook paper, made a 4, like a cross, 4 sections.
Yeah.
And when I put together the first section, messages that were disempowering kept coming up. And I knew there was something there because when I was speaking about my first book, Brain Makeover, and I would tell people, I would often ask, like, how many of you, especially as women, were told girls are to be nice, kind, and helpful. Children were to be seen and not heard. And like everybody would raise their hands.
Yeah.
And then I would often seriously but jokingly say, our minds are like a computer. The brain, it stores everything we took in. And that programming that we got in early childhood before age 7 is running your life today. So it's like you have a 5-year-old running your life, your business, and your relationships. And just like your reaction, I would get a chuckle. And that's the gist of this book.
Yeah. Yeah. And what so what would you say is the best way to uncover what in your life is running you of that old story, right?
Right. So some of us do know the messages we received in childhood,
Mhm.
especially those that might have labeled you and you've lived up to the label.
Yep.
Right? Like you're not good at math, you're not athletic, your sister's the pretty one, you're the smart one, right? Like all those the innocent, right? But not so innocent labels, or they're not helpful because they limit us.
Yes. Yes. that is exactly what happens. And I can tell you from my experience, it was, I relied on looking good on the outside validation and didn't do well in school and thought I was not intelligent. And come to find out when I got into college, I started getting A's because I was doing something I actually liked, right? And
Mm.
so that story I was telling myself for all those years wasn't true. And it was just sit there and look pretty and be nice and sweet and happy and in a good mood. And I just lost myself in that.
Right. And so we often know what it is, but there's a storehouse of information, things we were told pre-verbally that we're living out. There's things that we're not even aware of in our subconscious that all got recorded between birth and 7 to 8 years old before we developed critical thinking and could even discern any of this. And so if you don't know what's running the the programming, I have several chapters in the book that outline messages that we were commonly told that have been passed down from generation to generation about uh, life, work, and money. Like if you were told we can't afford that, money doesn't grow on trees, don't ask, right? Like we just don't have it. We
Yep.
those messages don't go away when you become 18 and you get your first job and you decide, oh, now I got a paycheck, I can buy my own stuff. No, you've been programmed with all that. And I've got like a 10 different categories of messages, examples, and vignettes from people, and really what that leads to in adulthood if you had those messages in childhood.
And so it's been my experience that I've been working through a lot of this throughout at least the last 15 to 20 years, right? And what's amazing to me is sometimes they can pop up again when stress hits. And I imagine a lot of people that have been kind of doing pretty well when the pandemic hit and when stress happens, those old patterns come back and you don't even realize it. So what's a way people can kind of get ahead of that? Or well, I know you have a lot of ways in the book, but I'm going to ask you to share with the audience what are some of the ways they can combat that.
So stress, when we have stress put on us, it really forces us to have to do something different. Like if you've got symptoms, I don't care if it's a sniffle, a sore throat, uh, it- tension in your body, like you can feel that stress. For some people, it's fear. For others, it could be overwhelm. But when we're in chronic stress, which a lot of people have been in, that is like survival mode. And
Yeah,
there is no way that you're going to function at your best and be able to do what you need to do or want to do
right,
on a
right.
daily basis. Probably the best advice that I can give anybody is when you're in high stress, that is the time to slow down, stop long enough to tune in and figure out what's going on. What am I thinking is often a good thing to contemplate because our thoughts are very powerful at determining what happens next. Could be what am I feeling? What am I experiencing that I don't want to experience? What can I do differently? So now when you stop and you choose to think and do some contemplation, you're actually breaking a pattern of just overriding. Like, how many of us learn to override our thoughts and feelings and body sensations?
Push them away, shove
Yep,
them down, get real
right.
busy.
Because we got things to do, right? We have to live up to this standard of expectations of others, maybe some perfectionism, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I'm hearing you say is
Hmm.
being curious within myself, noticing that something is happening, a disturbance, but even I want to say even when things are going really well, it's good to get curious. What's happening that I'm really on top of it. I'm creative, either time when I notice and get curious about what's happening in my body, what's happening in my mind, what's happening in my heart, my gut, when I'm able to go there, because we do have brains and sometimes we can use them for good, right? That's what I'm hearing you say.
Right.
We don't have to just push down everything. We get to see, wow, what's going on over there? That's an interesting new one, or that's an old one. I've been doing that forever. So um what kind of things do you recommend to people when they're in that moment of, okay, so then they see this pattern, then what?
So being able to identify a pattern is very helpful. And I talk about patterns of thoughts, patterns of feelings, and patterns of actions, and how you can actually replace them. But before you can replace them, you need to interrupt them. So noticing them is great. And even if you don't know what the pattern is, but you know there's something here, like I can't identify it, but it's a pattern, it's familiar. I do this all the time. Interrupting it is easy to do by shifting anything different, such as if you're stressed, in overwhelm, and you chose to look for something that made you happy, or you
Okay.
chose to do something that would bring you some joy. Now, it's counterintuitive to do that, especially if you're under deadlines and you've got things that got to get done. But you'll be so much better at completing whatever it is if you took 2 minutes and got yourself like maybe some sunshine or a beverage that you enjoy, whether it's a coffee or tea or something that's going to give you this interruption of the chaos and all that mind chatter and that feeling that just like calms you, relaxes you. Even if it's 2 minutes, it will make a difference in how you move forward with whatever it is you're doing.
Well, and but can you repeat that? It got a little glitchy on my end.
Oh, okay.
Just the last part.
Even if you do something that brings you happiness or joy for 2 minutes, it will make a difference in whatever it is that you're going to do next.
Yeah. And I find that sometimes just playing a song, my favorite song, right?
Mhm.
Just playing my favorite song and really moving my body. Moving my body tends to be a big one that really helps me shake it off, literally.
Right. You could dance, you could sing, right? You can do some yoga, qigong. You can do a 5 minute meditation. It doesn't matter what you do. What matters is doing something differently on purpose to change how you think or how you feel.
Doing something differently on purpose. That is
Yeah.
a beautiful statement. So first we have to be aware of something going on. Next, we get to interrupt it with
Mhm.
anything for 2 minutes and do it on purpose. Do it in the midst of, okay, I know I have this deadline, but I'm going to go walk around the block,
Yep.
whatever it is, right? Okay, do something different on purpose. Okay,
Something
so then what?
something enjoyable, right? You have
Different.
to allow yourself to embrace feeling better. Because if we don't choose to embrace it and allow it in, then we might be looking at a whole different scenario, such as fighting for our limitations. Um, this is where resistance comes in, and you may not know what that looks like or feels like until you identify it as procrastination, or, I'm really struggling with trying to get this project done. I don't want to do it. Just acknowledging how you feel is enough to sometimes take some pressure off, and then look at it and say, okay, I don't want to do this aspect of it. I don't mind doing this creative part, but I don't want to do the back end
Right.
stuff.
Can you go a little deeper into fighting for our limitations? Is that kind of a form of self-sabotage?
I think that when we fight for our limitations, that I wouldn't call it self-sabotage. I would call it, you want to stay in the safe zone. And here's why, because if you venture too far out from what you're familiar with, is going to feel uncomfortable. It may not feel safe. It might remind you of the last time or several times that you've done that and fallen on your face or failed in some way or embarrassed yourself. Like, those are all things your subconscious is going to have you doing something that prevents you from putting yourself in a position of creating a problem for yourself.
So, okay. So let's say I do this thing that brings me joy, but I feel guilty about it. How do I shake that off? How do I give myself that permission?
So how many of us were raised with the message, you're selfish. You just spend way too much time on yourself. You should think of others before yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Um, that I can remember as a kid, oh, you need to eat the broken pieces of like the cookie or the nuts or whatever. Save the whole ones for the guests, right? So we
Yeah.
get conditioned to think like putting ourselves first and honoring ourselves is bad and wrong. So it's no wonder that we have a hard time embracing feeling good and giving us like the time and the luxury. And it's sad to think the luxury of feeling good. No, we should feel good all the time. That's
Well,
when we're our best.
and I would dare to say it's not a luxury. It's actually part of our well-being and makes us whole as humans, right?
Right. I actually have a quote in here that um the book is so new, I don't know what page it's on. Um, but the gist of it is uh you can't be in well-being if you can't allow yourself to be happy and and take care of yourself. Like self-care and well-being, happiness, they all go together. You just can't live in high stress, chronic overriding things.
No, and when I did a retreat in November with 5 women, and when they gave themselves permission, it was almost you could see it. We as the retreat went on, as the weekend went on, at first people were holding back a little bit, felt a little funny. And we did this exercise. Anytime someone said, I'm sorry for something that they didn't do wrong, we all said, I'm beautiful, right? Instead of I'm sorry, I'm beautiful. And we would all correct each other if we heard ourselves doing it. But by the end, it was nobody needed to be corrected. We were correcting ourselves and they were yelling it. And it was just so cool to see the unfolding of allowing ourselves to be who we are, right?
There's that's so beautiful. I love that example because we often get conditioned to accept responsibility for things that aren't ours. As women, I can say like there's a handful of clients that when they say, I'm sorry, I'm like, for what?
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And so what I wrote about that in the book as well, that we got programmed to accept responsibility for things that aren't ours. And that's a burden that we carry.
Well, and you can't do anything with it, right? As a woman in recovery, learning that other people's stuff isn't mine, learning what's mine and what's not mine. That was really weird because I was always told to put others first and be of service, right? And that is a beautiful thing to do, but I think the idea of doing it ahead instead of yourself is really a hindrance. So I try to remind myself, remind my kids, because I don't think my teenagers really hear what I'm saying anymore. However, they see what I'm doing. And if they see me depleting and not taking care of myself, they're going to repeat that. So, yes, this is powerful stuff.
Yeah. And then the other piece that a lot of women do is self-sacrificing, because that's how most of us have been raised, to take care of others, make mom and dad happy. Like, at what age do you think that we first heard, you need to make mommy happy or go make daddy happy?
Oh, go cheer up your dad, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's not, it's interesting because there was this conversation I had with my daughter, and I was struggling with something, and I said, I'm not in a good place. This is not yours to worry about. I'll be okay. Here's what I'm doing to take care of myself, and I love you and appreciate you, right? I was open with the fact of what's going on, to the point where, she was younger, so to the point where she didn't have to take it on and know that it wasn't her responsibility, and just owning it myself and being transparent created a space for not to hide those things. I encourage people, don't hide your feelings, because when we hide our feelings, then they just build up and get big. At least for me, they build up and get bigger.
Yeah, what a great role model. She's so fortunate to have you as a mom with those kinds of skills. But I bet you didn't have those skills growing up.
Well, yeah, I've put a lot of work in.
Yeah.
I put a lot of work in. And, it's cool to see how my healing journey has really created healing in my whole family, and their healing journey is their healing journey. But it's really nice to be able to separate yourself from everyone else, and not in a way of I'm not a part of, but it's like, I think we've talked about this before, about catching the hot potato, right? If someone throws a hot potato at you, you don't have to catch it, right? I
Right.
don't have to hold, I can hold space for them and be there and be loving and kind and listen, and not make it my fault, because I used to make up stories in my head, and I don't know when this started, but that I was the reason someone was in a bad mood, right? That's where I used to go in my head. Oh, I did something wrong. They're mad at me, when it really probably could have been about something that came in the mail, right?
Exactly. We don't often take into account that other people have bad days, or they have situations that cause them to react to us in ways that we don't like. And then we internalize it and we're like, well, what's wrong with me? What did I do now?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, I know, okay, so we have about 5 more minutes, but I know you wanted to share a couple things from the book, and from one of them you created in your head right before the call. So I love it. So why don't you share with us some of the things that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah. So as I was thinking of our conversation today, this morning, I I was guided, like my intuition and guidance, uh, drew me to the section on all childhood experiences matter. And it's easy to get caught up in all that negativity. Like, my parents weren't there for me. They didn't have the time for me. They weren't emotionally available. They weren't good role models because they didn't have the resources to be able to do that. So we're not blaming parents, and like they did
No,
the best they could.
right.
Well and good. But if you reflect on your childhood and all you think about are the negative times, or you have very few fond memories that you bring up, I would challenge you to make a list of 10 positive things you remember from childhood. Like for me, I remember going to summer camp where they had horses, and I think I was like 10 or 11 years old. And I just thought it was the coolest thing to go horseback riding and go-karting and like swimming in this lake or whatever it was. And so that's a real fond memory. And I have other memories of 4th of July at my great grandmother's house. She lived in Santa Monica. So being able to walk to the beach and
Oh, wow.
be out there on the sand with probably thousands of people lighting fireworks and the little sparklers. And as I think about that, more and more details come up of, oh yeah. And remember when I got my first like set of roller skates, or the pogo stick that I got, like all these outdoor activities that of course I love being outdoors. And so you can get like, I just feel the energy of there's so much more that makes me me than the stories that I have continuously lived, because my brain, just like yours, has a negativity bias. We have to keep the past in check so that we don't end up with, repeating too many of those same things. But when we bring in some of the good moments, now we're balancing it out.
And a lot of people sometimes I've heard don't know what their purpose is, right? Don't really understand that what they're here for. And one of the things that I love to share is very similar to this. And it's, what are the fun things that you used to like to do as a kid?
Mhm.
What were you doing when you were having the most fun? And there's there's just so much with these positive memories. And when we go to that negative place, maybe interrupting them, that's something I can do, is say, oh yeah, but also we took a road trip, which was amazing, to California or whatever it is, and thinking about the times where I was belly laughing, because just as much as things can be stressful, things are were also beautiful and are.
Right. And maybe some of those moments were when you weren't with your family. Like when I was at camp, I wasn't with my family.
Right, right.
Or I might have been in the backyard roller skating by myself and just having the time of my life. And so
Yep.
knowing that I can entertain myself and I like being with me and doing things myself. Well, if you're going to be a writer and write books, well, you got to have a lot of alone time with yourself and your computer. Uh, and maybe for you, it might have been hanging out with friends, and you really thrive on social interactions and collaborating with others and being part of a team. Those are really valuable traits to get clear so that you can make a good choice of where you want to spend your time and energy.
Well, and bringing it back to this idea of noticing the awareness and the interruption and what to fill that interruption with, right?
Mhm.
Because when we're constantly stressed and when we have a lot on our plate, I think having that list, that positive list, and of things that they can do to interrupt it, and put it on your mirror or put it somewhere where you can see it when you're, where, like I would say, putting it at your office if you're stressed there mostly, or whatever, and just look at it every day and remind yourself. And you don't have to be stressed and having a pattern to do things that you like to do either.
Right. Now, for a lot of people that have morning routines that start your day with something, that you do for you. Doesn't matter if it's exercise, meditation, eating a good breakfast, uh, reading something inspirational, listening to your favorite song. Like, you can start your day with anything that feeds you and sustains you.
I love it. I love it. So one last question. What did you learn? What was your biggest aha during this process of writing this book?
Wow. So what I didn't expect to happen was, as I wrote this transformational book, that I would become transformed, and that I had so much stuff come up for me during the process that I had to relook at or look at in a new way, or maybe even for the first time, some of the things. So it was really powerful. And I can tell you that when you think about an end result of something or the destination, when I get there, I'm going to be so happy. I can say, enjoy the journey, because it's in who you become along the way. And all those, like, I wouldn't say all of them were magical moments. Some of them were really hard. But once you get through that and you get to know yourself better and you become more confident and resilient and happier and healthier, instead of all that other stuff like having self-doubt and lack of confidence, and right, and all these messages that we were brought up with, living by that, I would take where I got today over that any day.
And what does an empowered person look like?
An empowered person knows themselves well enough to know what's right for them. So they are living at a pace that they can tune in, think about what's going on, feel what's right for them, make decisions that are right for them, not based on how they were raised or the expectations of others or comparing themselves to other people, but really valuing who you are.
That's beautiful. They can live at a pace, they can tune into themselves
Yes.
and what's going on, and and thanking themselves for the value they have is profound, right? When we know that we're valuable, we're intrinsically valuable to ourselves, we're going to behave in a way that we value ourselves. So that is a beautiful, beautiful message that you have. And Phyllis, is always a pleasure and a joy to collaborate and learn more from you and with you and walk this road, because you are someone that has, since I've met you, has been very deliberate in your choices. And this choice to write this book is a gift to so many. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Great. All right. Well, we're going to go for now. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And, oh, wait, where can they find you?
My website is phyllisginsberg.com, and I'll spell that PHYLLISGINSBERG.com.
And I'll put the link to her book and the website in the chat as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.